This episode of the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast is supported by our friends at Fairfax and Favour, and we wanted to tell you a little bit more about their extraordinary story. It was a story that began back in 2012 when two friends made a rather ambitious pact to combine their middle names and launch their very own footwear brand. They were actually funded by shifts at the local pub, and they then took a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Spain to find a factory that would produce luxury goods that would help kickstart the dream. From storing their precious new wares in a loft, launching on the show circuit and pursuing that dream, the Fairfax and Favour vision has since exploded, and there's a range now that includes bags, clothing, boots and sandals. The luxury shoe giants have an array of awards, including last year a Lloyds Bank Business Excellence Award, and they're passionate about raising money for charity and have already donated over £500,000 to really worthy causes. Their story continues, but for more information, go and visit their website, fairfaxandfavour.com.
Welcome to the Grassroots Show on the Echo Ratings Eventing Podcast. I'm Rosie Russell, and today we have a very special guest. I think he was on the show about this time last year talking about our 3-day events and how to prepare for our cross-country roads and tracks. But we've got him back on because everybody loves to hear from Sam Watson. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Rosie. Thanks for and I have to say, great job that you're doing with this Grassroots Show. I was listening to Rider Fitness the other day. You know, it's not just, you know, you're always trying to steal tips and everything like that. So I tell you, it's not just a Grassroots Show, to be honest. I definitely keep my ear out to what you're talking about and enjoy the show. So it's great to be back on.
Oh, well, thank you very much. Today we have sent out for our listeners to send in any questions they have that are grassroots related. And we have been inundated with questions, so we'll get stuck in. And our first one is from Emily, who is looking to buy a new horse to event at the grassroots level. What would be some of the key things you'd look for if you had a client going out to look for a grassroots horse?
So the first thing has to be temperament. You know, I know we all want to win, and we all want to get that kind of great feeling that a really athletic horse can give us, you know, over a fence. They can, you know, give you a great feeling off the ground and things like that. You can absolutely have it all. You know, as in there are horses with great temperaments and great athletic ability, and they're very, you know, they're good in all phases. But normally we have to make compromises. You know, like I've had to do that my whole life with horses. I'm recording from Buccalo, and the only time I've ever paid more than about 15,000 euros for a horse was Rocket Man, who's here in Buccalo, who we stretched to 25,000. I had to outbid Emily King when he was a 4-year-old. So, you know, we're always kind of playing with a restricted budget. So, and you got to remember, eventing is a skilled sport. So a lot of things will improve with training. So even things like scope, technique, things that some people will disagree with me on, saying, you know, a horse either has it or it doesn't when it comes to ability. But I think at grassroots level, they can learn an awful lot. They can even learn ditch it. You know, there's lots of training you can do to help a horse overcome things like fear of water, fear of ditches and stuff like that. It's rapid. You have to be prepared to put in the work and go schooling regularly and have the patience to build up slowly and do things like that. But what is really, really hard for someone with less experience to manage is a horse that has a mind of its own, a kind of a will to do its own thing, and a huge amount of power that can take you in the wrong direction quickly. That kind of, you know, imagine an athlete like Usain Bolt, or, you know, any of those Olympians that you see, human Olympians in athletics final or something like that. They're jumping up and down, shaking their head from side to side, pumping up the crowd. If your horse is that way inclined, that's going to be a lot for you to handle. And doesn't matter how much ability they have, you'll win gold medals at home all the time. You'll win the Olympics at home, but when you go out to a show, you could struggle. So you got to find a temperament. And, you know, so what I would say is try a horse. Like if you've got a horse who's proven that, has got a nice steady record, with someone who doesn't have loads of experience, you know, again, possibly not buying off a professional and stuff like that. That's not a hard and fast rule. I mean, I have amateur horses and have sold them on, and they've gone well for their new yards. But by and large, if you're playing the odds, then if they've gone out with someone with lesser experience before, that's a good sign. And try them away from their yard as well. You know, it's again, as a vendor, you know, the more times you try horses, the more times you're tearing your hair out, being like, oh, the horse is perfect, we need to go and try it again. And you don't need to try it low, you know, you just try it once, but just maybe not at home, see what it's like in a different place, and go and take it down different areas and stuff like that, and see what it's like, and then you'll know.
I like that, trying it away from home, because, you know, you get sucked into, especially if there's a horse you like, you think, right, let's buy it really fast because I want to get it. So yeah, making sure it's right is such a key thing. We've had one come in from Instagram where you talk about training just then, to say, how do you design your training program to improve various aspects of your riding? Of your own riding as a rider? Yeah.
So one thing that one of my biggest weaknesses is looking at myself on video. You know, it's feedback. It's really important. And with actually what I'm doing a lot now is I actually train via Zoom, Google Meet. So my dressage trainer, Tracy Robinson, is at home. And more for for me, it's excellent because your trainer is giving you more than just technical advice as to what you should, what not to be doing with your left hand or your right hand or your right ankle or your left ear. It's as well for your headspace as well, telling you that, no, this is good, this is progress, just stay doing this exercise, a few more transitions. Sometimes we just get a little bit lost when we're by ourselves and we're like, God, what am I doing? And I'm throwing the kitchen sink, I'm doing 10-meter loops, I'm doing serpentines, I'm doing transitions, I don't really know what I'm doing. We kind of get into that sort of state. So you got a trainer to sometimes just help you repeat the exercise, because that's how you're going to improve, is repetition. And then detail, like with each repetition, what is a small thing I could have done better? And it's always the small things. It's always the basics, and it's always the small things. And you need feedback sometimes to help you do that, because a lot of the times you're not noticing what you're doing. So the world has changed. Back in the day, you might have had to travel an hour. You might not even have a Jeep and trailer, or a 2-horse. If you're really lucky, you have all those things, and going for a lesson is easy, and there's a trainer nearby, and you can do it, and you have the resources. But if you think of the cost and the time of going away from home for a lesson, you could probably have 3 lessons, and even just half hour, you could be warmed up, and you just need someone in your yard to say, can you, if the person that you need feedback from isn't in your yard, but someone that you can train when, you say, look, can we just jump on Zoom, jump on Google Meet, do whatever it is. Not all trainers like doing it, but for me, that is a massive tool to just help you give the feedback, because there's no point in me. I mean, the general thing that I would say to everyone is, it is repetition, it is simple stuff, and it is basics, and it's small incremental improvements. And that's for anyone. It's tearing up the training book completely can be a bit unnerving for someone. The feeling like, I've got to ride again, almost that's probably too much. It's meet people where they are, gradually take them away. But to be honest, whether for someone it might be contact issues, for another person it might be getting a horse a little bit more in front of your leg, another rider it might be how to quieten them down, like maybe getting the seat a little bit more relaxed and stuff. So everyone's going to have different things they need working on. That's why you need the help and the feedback. So try something new, like those remote video stuff, or get someone to send off a video to a trainer and say, look, can you just look at this? It's just 3 minutes of me doing a test. What would you recommend I do? It's just feedback, and for you to see yourself as well is really, really valuable.
We all forget as well the time and the money it costs to go to lessons, that just becomes just back of our brain. And when you said it, like how many lessons you could fit in that time, it suddenly makes you realize, you could be utilizing your time in a much better way by doing video lessons and things like that.
Yeah, it's a game changer for me. Like, and as I say, it's probably harder for Tracy, who would love to be she's actually a really engaged. You watch Tracy Robinson training. She's trained William Fox Pitt, Kitty King, just won European silver medal and stuff. Poor Tracy's put up with me, but she is so involved. Like you're doing a half pass, she's like doing a half pass herself across the arena, looking at you, and then she's like moving across the arena to the other place. So when she is to sit with her iPad on her couch at home and teach, I know it's hard for her. But we have Sparks moving around with the camera. I know it's hard for Sparks as well. Her arm gets tired holding
doing a half pass across the arena.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to get the right angles and stuff. But you'll all get better at it. You'll all get used to it. But it is just so valuable because it's little enough. And you think this is where we fall down as equestrian sports, is the amount of purposeful practice we do with feedback. In golf, tennis, they're always training with their coaches. They always have eyes on them. They always have someone to help them with the little details. And they also, your tennis racket and your golf clubs don't try and lead you off track. They're not living beings with little habits to get out of doing a good swing or whatever. Horses are trying to lead us astray all the time. They want to lean on that right rein a little bit more, lean through that right shoulder a little bit more. They're doing these little things. And then the better we know the horse, the more those habits just become, we don't even notice them. We so need eyes on us. So the more efficient we can do that, the better. And that's something that I've had to do as well. That's one of the reasons I use the Echo Ratings big screen, as Diarm was famous for being a weatherman, doing his big screen work. And I now have that big screen in my office, which is brilliant for helping people and doing remote lessons.
Well, on the note of coaches and instructors, how would you recommend people find a coach or an instructor that suits them and their goals? Because there are so many people out there now for people to choose from.
Yeah, there are. It's look, it is a bit of trial and error. It's person first. You have to get on with this person. It's definitely about having the right person, not the best person, if that makes sense. So there are coaches with great CVs and have achieved great things in the sport, but if you don't have a connection with them that allows you to be really honest, that you have enough respect that you will go with them when they're pushing you out of the comfort zone, and that's the hard thing as a coach. I've got to help people to break down habits that they don't even know they're doing sometimes, which again, that's why you use video, because it's really useful to say, this is what I'm talking about. But it can be hard, so I've got to be able to push you. But then I also want to inspire people to believe in it, go and practice it, be fully committed. That again, you need that belief. If you guys aren't on the same page, if you're not believing in that this is the way forward and that we're going to get there, because there'll be rough patches. Not every day is going to be a massive breakthrough progress day. As I say, a lot of days just have to be repetition, simple things, and you've got to trust that. You've got to trust that that's the process, and trust in the coach that they have that process. So that's all, believing in that person. Don't change too quickly or too often. But when the gut feeling is gone, if you're starting to, trust is a word I would use. If you're starting to lose trust and lose belief, there's absolutely nothing wrong in going and trying with trying with another coach. And I would even say that to I've got people that I've been teaching now for 4 or 5 years and taught them before they went off to do underage teams, and they're now doing underage teams and winning medals. And I think it's good when they go into those performance systems and they train with other people, because it's more feedback, it's more information, and it's okay as long as you're in that place that you can consume, you can take it on board, see is it working and helping. But I'm not possessive and it doesn't have to be exclusive. So, and I think that's important as well, for people to not feel that they're overly committed to one coach, and that if they ever go off to another clinic because someone new is in the area or something like that, they feel like they're going to upset the apple cart and stuff like that. That wouldn't be healthy either. So yeah, go person first is really my main advice there.
I like that one. We've had a question come in from Jess, who says, how do you see the relationship between professional riders and grassroots riders?
Our job is to, this without sounding big, our job is to inspire. When I look at, we just had the Ryder Cup in golf, and they'll have the USO. I'm a very casual golf fan. In fact, I couldn't actually watch much Ryder Cup at all this weekend, just because traveling and all the rest. But I like to tune in. Same with tennis and Wimbledon. And when you see someone that makes you want to pick up a tennis racket or makes you want to pick up a golf club, as a skilled sports person, but also as just a person. And I think that's really important in the horse world as well. Not someone who's just talented and gets results, but someone who rides in a way that inspires you because, you know, how they treat their horses and how their attitude towards training horses and things like that. I think that's the most important thing, to be honest, for professional. I think that's what we have to remember. You know, we can't be, if we're out there just complaining about prize money or complaining about dressage judges or complaining about frangible pins or whatever, I don't think we're setting a good example. If we can go out there and inspire people to want to do this at whatever level they choose to, I think that's the most important thing. And so then part of that is that can turn into mentorship, because that's the reason I went to the UK when I was in my just had left university, and I decided I want to give this a go. Went to the UK because not just having a good eventing circuit, but so I could be in a warm-up arena with William Fox Pitt when he was doing a B100, or Andrew Nicholson when he was notoriously falling off a 5-year-old going around a novice in March, because that's what he did. Because to sharpen himself up for badminton, he would take his 5-year-olds around a novice in the spring. And sometimes he would fall off, and that was great. But it was actually amazing to watch him, how he was managing those horses and giving them confidence and reassuring them and things like that. So being around those people, and then being able to, you know, I remember walking the course here at Buccleuch with William, and I remember walking the course at Bramham, my first Bramham, with Andrew Nicholson, being brave enough to just, I mean, with Andrew, I could see him with a wheel in the lorry park, and I got myself ready and I went to the start. And then I don't know what he did, whether he went for it, but I had to wait for about half an hour so that I could just accidentally bump into him and happen to be at the start while he was at the start. And could I just tag along? But I completely planned it. But he was absolutely fine to be like, yeah, sure. You know, sometimes we have to respect, if we see, like, you know, and if they're walking with their manager or they're walking with owners or something like that, it might not be the time or place. But I think it's important for us to also then offer our experience, and wisdom might be a stretch, but yeah, offer advice where we can.
Definitely not a stretch. But I think that's what's so lovely about our sport, is not every sport you can walk up to a pro and ask for help and advice whilst you're sometimes competing in the same class and things like that. So I think that is a great reflection of the eventing community.
I'll add to it as well. Like, it's actually not just for the rider who's asking the question. If you want to learn something, read about it. If you want to understand something, write about it. And if you want to master something, teach it. That's not my phrase. I've stolen that from someone. I can't remember who it was, but that is something that I realized was happening to me the more I was teaching. And I struggled in the beginning to teach. You know, you got to learn how to teach, but also you become a master of the subject matter. You become the more fences I had to walk for people cross country, the more I became a master of the trade. I'm not saying I'm there yet, but that is how you learn and get to the next step. So teaching is such a valuable thing. So if there are people listening to this who are graduating from the grassroots rider to now actually a bit more of a season, and you're starting to have people coming up to you asking for advice, that's a brilliant thing. You know, take that on board and actually go in search of those. You know, there's going to be, if you're in your third or fourth season riding around 100s, you have loads of experience and information that you can share with someone who's just starting out on that journey. So there's a great benefit to actually helping people.
I love this next question that's come in from David. What is the biggest or best thing that you've learned from a grassroots rider?
Oh, great. From a grassroots rider. Yeah, the emotion. I'll be honest, you fall in and out of love with the sport, as I'm sure people have with their jobs. You know, not every day can be brilliant, and they can be tough as well. Days can be tough as well. Now, I am a much more level person, but I mean, Sparks will tell you there's days when I'm not. There's days when I'm in the dumps, and like, why am I still doing this? And should I be doing? You know, is it time to retire and stuff like that? I've really asked myself that question, not just in a dramatic way. That it's just, you know, I've really taken that question seriously and come very, very close to hanging up the boots. But the more you're around people for whom this is a And I have a job as well, you know, with equity ratings. I know what it's like to also have a job as well. And so that absence can make the heart grow fonder, you know, when you realize going, oh God, no, actually riding horses and going to an event, that's not my job. Like it's a privilege. Like it's a great thing to be able to do. And the reminder of that is brilliant. And I just think you see more emotion both ways at grassroots level. I think the tough days are tougher because you haven't experienced them as much, and it's can be a big sacrifice, you know, if you've got a busy professional life and then your weekend is your event and you've maybe spent way more of your disposable income than you should have buying a horse, and way more then on tack, and you know, you're going like, oh my God, I am spending every penny I can on horses, and I can hardly buy myself a sandwich and a coffee to get there because of how much I'm spending on my horse. And then you go and fall off at the third fence and you just go, what am I doing? So seeing that emotion both ways is a good reminder for me, I think, to, you know, to sort of enjoy, not take the good days for granted. Because when you see people having tough days, you know, it's a reminder to me that actually in having got to the level that I've got to, I've done 11 championships, and you know, I've gone around Burley again there for a second time and stuff like that, that you go like, you've achieved plenty. And I rarely tell myself that, but it's good to sometimes tell yourself that. But then the flip side as well is when you're just going and you're taking 5 horses off the lorry to event that day, and you're going through the motions and you're just working, and then you see somebody like nearly crying with tears as to how happy they are that they've completed their first 100 or their first 90, then you go, God, don't forget the joy. Don't forget the joy either, because this is a great sport, and to remember that. So yeah, it's the emotion, I would say.
I like that one. Jack has asked, how does the grassroots market affect breeding and production of horses? And should we be producing more horses for the grassroots market?
That's a brilliant question, Jack. Brilliant question. Look, we don't have the pathway right in the sport, in that it is too much of a dressage competition at the lower levels, because, and it kind of a little bit, it's maybe at 80 and 90 there are more mistakes because more rider error mistakes, but like certainly to try and win a 100 and try and win a lot of 90s, you know, when you see these teen scores, that basically says that the way to play the game is to go actually to your local dressage rider and go, look, have you got a horse who can half jump? And that would be a really competitive crowd, because I'll teach at the cross country, and it's not enough of a stamina test. It's not enough of a footwork test, and it's not enough of a stamina test. So distance is what gives us. So in the old days when we had the steeplechase, which is why I love the 100 long format that Bicton certainly used to do. I'm not sure if they still do it, but they definitely used to do it. I love that, because a horse has to have the ability to go that extra gear faster over safe fences, you know, brush fences, safer. So once a horse can do that, that goes, okay, my dressage horse isn't going to thrive going steeple chasing at that pace, or over that distance, that longer distance. So I have to start with an event horse, and then I've got to learn how to train the dressage, train the jumping. And for me, that's the journey. And also it's the footwork. It's the speed of the footwork. So the dressage horses have slower footwork. It's not the old expression of, you know, it's not mental. It's not the dumb blood phrase. It's just they move. They have the big moving trot. It's just the hind legs are moving slowly. And for cross country, if you're coming down in this big canter, big slow canter, and then they're relying on you basically to help them get the distance right, because if the distance is wrong, they don't always have the speed of footwork to get it right. And that's why you get these uncomfortable, awkward jumps. Whereas the Irish horses are naturally, they have much quicker footwork because of that thoroughbred. Thoroughbreds can, speed is how fast you move your feet and your stride length. So look, that's I won't get too technical on it, but so at grassroots level, there is too much of a bias towards the dressage. That does affect the horse. And actually, because of the market, and even, getting into 2-star internationals. When you think of amateurs who want to go in international level, juniors riders, that's the biggest volume of event horses are in that 90, 100 and novice 2-star international level. They are all the most dressage dominated phases, and so that's what the event horse is becoming a bit more, which takes away that, as I say, for me, mainly footwork and mainly stamina. And that then is a massive challenge when we're looking at badminton Burghley, particularly when it's wet. Badminton this year in the wet, you're looking 2 minutes into the course and you're going, these horses cannot travel on this ground. Like, these horses are uncomfortable 2 minutes into a course. What's going on? Why wasn't this happening 10 years ago? And that is just the direction that sport has gone in. So I would, for me, 5-star is, I would not change 5-star, I would not change badminton Burghley, but I would look down the levels and I would say, right, we've got to help the cross country to have a stronger place in the sport. I would look at length of course, I would look at undulations and things like that, where you can reward footwork and you can reward stamina a bit more. And actually the art of and the fun of getting horses fit is great. That's a huge part of the training. And it doesn't have to be, that doesn't mean you have to go off hacking for 2 days and bring a rucksack with you and a big water supply. It's not like that. There's loads of ways to get a horse fit that can still fit in with the busy amateur life where you only have half an hour, 40 minutes to ride your horse. You can still design a fitness program around that, but there's a lot of fun in that. Whereas for me, if you're eventing, you're not naturally going to find as much fun in trying to perfect that dressage and get it down to a teens dressage test to go out and win. And it's not, the day you break, for me, the day you break into the 20s, you're like, yes, I've done a 29, I've done a 28. And if you finish on that and you still finish 7th or 8th, you're like, oh God. So we've got to look at that. I think the sport has got to look at how we make cross country more influential.
So a question from me then would be, although badminton and Burghley is not the old school long format that it used to be, would you introduce the old school long format into grassroots eventing more frequently then?
I would. I think at 2 and 3-star, and then definitely at 100 as well, I would have more. Let's just call it a class type. So we got the short format, the current long format, and then whether we call it the extra long or whatever. So the steeplechase speeds, for anyone who wasn't doing them back in the day, they start at 620 and they went up to 690 meters per minute. Whereas our current cross country paces are, well, actually at grassroots level, they're down 500 and even lower than that. But 520 is the international 2-star pace, 520 meters per minute. Now, at the Junior Europeans just gone that you were commentating on very expertly, there were 60 horses out of 75 clear inside the time. That's an 80% clear inside the time record or rate. And speed is actually the first attribute that will fully develop in a horse, certainly by the time they're 5 or 6. Whereas dressage and jumping are very strength-based, they're very technical-based. They will not fully develop you'll continue to improve a horse's dressage and a horse's jump well into their teens, whereas their speed and their aerobic capacity is already really diminishing by the time you get to 10, 11, 12, and certainly into teens, whereas it's fully developed when it's 5 or 6. So the racing guys will tell you 2 or 3, but I don't agree with that. But somewhere around that 4, 5, 6-year-old age, horses are well able to go fast. But we don't want to be galloping flat out at fixed fences, like a pin, a square oxer on a cross country course. But that's where the steeplechase was really useful, because the fences were more forgiving. We got to use a higher gear, which is good fun. And it also means that then when you're going cross country, if you've been going 620 meters per minute for your steeplechase, and then you drop back down to 520, you learn to go cross country within yourself. Whereas what we see more at the higher level now is you see riders pushing horses because you're trying to maximize dressage and get ahead. And then you kind of, they're slapping them down the shoulder, scrubbing. I was kind of holding on for dear life going around Burghley because Talisman is that old fashioned, blood horse. And he was always in his comfort zone. And I think that you should be for cross. I think the test, what puts you out of the comfort zone is how difficult the course is. And it's you against the course, but it's not you against the course and trying to squeeze everything out of your horse. Whereas if we had some of that higher gear steeplechase incorporate. And to be honest, you could do a 4-minute cross country and just have the last 2 minutes chase fences at a higher and have a phase A, phase B, but all within one. You don't have to stop in between. First maybe 5 minutes of cross country is normal through the finish flags, and straight away your phase B time starts, and you got to do 2 minutes at a higher pace or something like that. I think we need to be more creative, but I think it would bring the fun back, and I think it would give a place back to a horse. I think we're actually breeding the 5-star event horse is actually being bred out of the sport because of what it takes to win at the lower levels. And that's a concern.
Well, this next question probably links in quite nicely to what we've been talking about. Georgia asks, how do you see the future of grassroots eventing?
A more creative cross country. Undulation is another thing that's really useful to bring in. Now, will we see more frangible fences and possibly even knockable fences on cross country? Now, you got to be careful of that. There's a lot of cross country people at their core thinking knockable fences. What is he talking about? Now, not show jumps, not 10 kg rails in 18 or 20 millimeter cups. In Irish hunter trials, you have these kind of rubber cups, half cups, that it's a much heavier pole, like you would see normal fences built out of cross country, but it's just, we don't have the funds to be buying the frangible and assembling frangible fences. So we make this kind of deformable fence that if you hit it hard enough, it will actually bounce out of the rubber cup. But it's a very deep cup. But what it does is if you got a horse who is running out of steam and doesn't have great footwork and makes a bit of a mess of a fence and wears it, rather than sort of half falling off but hanging on and getting away with it and having a clear round and you still win on your 22 dressage, you actually reward the tidier, more polished cross country, somebody who's gone around in nice rhythm, fuel tank was good, footwork was good, nice clean round, nice polished round of cross country. I'm on the fence about things like knockable flags and what I've just talked about, more deformable fences, but I think if used well, I don't think we can rule them out. I think we've got to open our minds a little bit. But I would love to see, it's a challenge, but I'd love to see more stamina and a little bit more speed in the game, but safe speed, safe fences, steeplechase fences. Even if it's only twice a year, we used to, spend our whole spring building up to the spring 3-day. We didn't do much in June, July when the ground was really hard and end up having to get the vet out because we've been doing too much and on hard ground. And then we'd build up to something big in the autumn as well when there was a little bit of rain coming back in on softer ground. So, I think there's no harm in that either. During the summer, a bit more show jumping and stuff like that. If we go back to traditional event horses, we do need to train the jumping a little bit more. Whereas if we're riding horses that are actually bred for jumping and bred for dressage, and that's there, and then we're just sort of getting away with the cross country and it's messy and scrappy and not very inspiring, I think that's a bad direction for the sport.
Well, Jordan has asked if you could rewrite the scoring all the rules for eventing, what would you change first?
First thing is I would cap that dressage. So, we have a bunch of people. I can't believe this. I've been banging on with this so long that I've not been prepared with these questions, folks. Rosie is.
I was throwing them at him. So. Yeah,
well, you can tell. I had to think about the emotion from the grassroots riders. That was a really good question as well, because we do all learn from each other. Love that question. But on the scoring system, we shouldn't be an extreme sport. So if we're going to have extreme scoring in dressage, which means you can get ahead and you can do a 19 dressage, we should technically have extreme scoring in cross country so that if you're 30 seconds under the time, you get rewarded for that. But we don't do it because we say we're not looking for extreme performance. We're looking for really balanced performance. We're looking for the best all-rounder, which is a strange concept, but it works, So we got to get the balance right. How far do we push the best all rounder? How good should we be in each phase? Now, clearly, if 80% of people are going clear inside the time cross country, you can be below average and you're getting the best score. That doesn't work, so there's too many people getting the 0 in cross country, but then there's not enough people getting 0 in dressage. There should be a handful of people in dressage saying that's good enough. That's all we were looking for, is that you can do everything really nicely. And whether you can do an 18 dressage or a 25 dressage, we don't care. In the same way, we don't care if you're 2 seconds under the time or you're 20 seconds under the time. We don't care. We're just setting a test that you're good enough. And that's a concept which is alien to people. It's the same in the show jumping. You got about 25, 30, sometimes 40% of people jumping a clear round and getting 0 penalties. We should have at least 10% of people in dressage getting 0 penalties. And then the goal is to finish on that. If you need a tiebreaker, there's probably something wrong with your system. If you need a tiebreaker too much of the time, it means your jumping phases are too easy. But you could even go back to the dressage percentage to break them up on the tie break. But what you're not doing is you're not handing the horse with an 18 dressage or a 16 dressage or a 12 dressage. You're not giving them 2 rails advantage over someone who's done a 26. Like a 26 is a really good score. 2 fences down is not a good score. That's not a good show jumping. We're all disappointed if we've had 2 down. But if someone's had 2 down with an 18 dressage and they're still beating the person who did a 26 and clear, that balance is off. So we've got to cap the dressage, and we've got to get used to the idea that we can have a handful of people on 0 after the first phase.
And LC from the Discord group has said, is 1 star doing its job?
I think the big thing is, I've talked about the scoring system with dressage. I've talked about the need for speed. Okay, so I'm going to put that to one side, because where 1 star does its job is it gives people a dream and it gives people a goal. And that's really important. And if you want to compete internationally, like, to be honest, one of the biggest, I've got to be careful because she's beside me and she can hear, but I'd love to see Sparks at an international doing a 1-6, because I think she'd be brilliant. I think she'd do really well. And I know she doesn't want to do novice, and no, because she had a really good horse, and that's all right. And lots of people don't want to do novice, and they're well able. They could absolutely go around a 110. They absolutely have it, but they don't. They're just like, I don't need that amount of nerves and anxiety and fear in my life. I like to compete in the comfort zone. It's my hobby. I like to go very well prepared, be very competitive, but I don't want to put, I'm not a daredevil necessarily. And I think that's a really healthy thing. But that 1 star level then could, I've heard of people thinking about, going to Italy to do a 1 star. And like, that's such a cool adventure for people who can do that, because it's a cool adventure for us. Like going to Bertoni, you got to plan the journey, all that kind of extra knowledge that you need, listening to your Red Mills podcast to get your, how am I going to keep the electrolytes up and the hydration and all that kind of stuff. So it's great. So I think 1 star is a brilliant thing for the sport. I think it will grow and grow hugely over the next 10 years. I think it could become the biggest volume level like 2 star currently is. I think 1 star could become that, should become that, and that's great. And it's great for the economy of the sport. We've just got to make sure that it stays true to eventing and it doesn't turn into a kind of a reject for failed dressage and jumping horses. It's got to have enough cross country about it, but I love it. I love the concept.
It's that stepping stone onto the international stage, and it makes it accessible for more people. And like you say, it allows people to dream, which is really great.
Yeah.
Okay, we've had another question come in. And this one I find quite interesting, because in the UK, our grassroots market, I'd say it's quite big, and loads of people aim for the grassroots championships at badminton. And you can't do that if you've got points, and you get points when you step up to novice. So this person, Samantha, is asking, does she keep her horse at 100 and sell it as a grassroots horse, or does she step it up to novice and risk getting points on it? Like, what would make it more valuable?
That's a really good question. And, we at Ratings do plenty of work with British eventing. And I think that's something that we could definitely look at as to, should there be a reset button at some point, if a rider is clearly a grassroots rider, but then you got to be careful about, we sort of need this window of going, you've allowed someone who's built this relationship and partnership with a horse, that they're now comfortable enough to, and experienced enough as a combination to go and try novice and get some points and take them to the next level. They don't want to have to buy it, but then they still need to practically, to fund their life, they will need to sell that horse at some point. And it'd be a perfect school match. So there's like an in-between thing. So there's a difference between buying a horse who's been around Blenheim and someone getting on that and having a real sort of push button of a horse to go grassroots. I think as a competitor, you feel like a bit sort of like going, okay, someone's rolled up in a Ferrari and I'm here in my Ford Fiesta. This feels a little unfair. Or maybe we have 2 types of grassroots. Maybe there's the 100 well, there is a 100 open, isn't there? But you know, we got to look at that. But I think that in between window, I think to go and have a season at novice with a horse, and remember that phrase novice means that the horse is still inexperienced, is still novice, like they're not even intermediate yet, or whatever. I think there should definitely be an allowance for horses to reset, because I think partnership is a massive thing. And if you've, as a rider, built a great partnership with a horse and you're ready to go to the next level, it would be a shame, I think, if you felt, oh Christ, but this horse is now at peak value and I'll devalue the horse if I go novice. So I'll go and buy a different horse to go novice with, and that might not work out so well. So really good question, thought-provoking one for the higher powers, but we might be able to put a good word in to keep that.
Well, Chloe has asked, she has a horse at home that's very spooky with fillers. Have you got any tips or tricks to try and help the horse become less spooky over time?
Yeah, you got to start. So go back, put a pole on the floor, go over a pole on the ground, so I had this with Bushman. Okay, here's story and segue. My first lesson with Yogi Breiser, I didn't have many. I had a few lessons with Yogi Breiser actually, because he used to come over to Ireland then a bit. But my first ever one, I was with Laura Collett, and Yogi was coming round, and so I said, "Oh, can I jump in now?" I'd already been around the World Championships at this point with Bushman, and so he arrives up and he's like, "Okay, just warm up over the cross pole, and I'm just going to go to the bathroom." And so we go to warm up over the cross pole, and George Bushman stops. This horse has been around the World Championships, and he always had that in him. You know, he was just a suspicious character, and I fell off, went clean over his head, because I was just, you know, talking to Laura and not concentrating, and Yogi gone to the bathroom, or I thought he had. But so I quickly got back up, mortified, like dusting the sand off my legs and everything like that, and then got back on and was jumping the cross pole by the time he came back. And he says, "Okay, everybody, just come in a moment." And he said, "Laura, very nice. Just watch your straightness." And he said, "Sam, very, very important that you remember that when you fall off, you wipe the sand off your back as well, because I can tell." So look, that's a lesson that all horses can be spooky, even when they've been to the top level. But what I didn't do well enough, because George was that really special horse that put up with me making so many mistakes, and took me through to the, allowed me to take him through to the top level. Like, we bred him. I took him to Young Riders when he was 7. I took him around Buccalo when he was 8. I took him to Badminton, I think, when he was 10. Mad stuff that he allowed. And we were both learning, and he put up with me. But my basics were bad. That's the key. My basics were bad. And I needed to do more of and I couldn't actually, canterpulls were something that were really bad. He'd always change legs over a canterpull. It would all be messy. He wouldn't be straight. It'd be all, and that's what you gotta get that better. So start off with a pole, then get in like a little scary plank, and obviously they're probably not going to spook at the pole because this is fillers, but it's got to be small enough. Whereas a filler generally starts at they're about 2 foot high or something, but even that is too high. So try and find something a bit scary, or if you're going to put a coat over the pole, but have jumped the pole 5 or 6 times so they're used to it, and then start making things more spooky. But you got to really gradually increase the spookiness, whereas going from no filler to a 2 foot filler is actually too big a jump, and we all think that's silly. Like, what's he saying? Yeah, it's only 2 foot, but it's too much of a, oh my god, this is too different. You've got to meet a horse where they're at and gradually take them to the next level. Like, progress is marginal gains. It's small progresses. That's not a real word, but anyway, we'll leave it in. And for some horses, they can go from a pole to a 2 foot filler and they don't care. But the horses that do go, oh my god, that's a big jump, you got to find a way to meet them in the middle. So get creative, something smaller, and repetition.
Just slowly building that confidence, not throwing them in at the deep end.
Exactly. Yeah.
So our last question, Sam, and I quite like this last question, is what is the most obvious mistake you see people make at grassroots level, and how would you fix it?
I think it's probably being out of control cross country, speed. So for me, cross country, you have 4 responsibilities: speed, straightness, softness, and staying on. So not many people teach the softness, which is basically because the horses need to jump. They need to be, like we talked about, that footwork and adjustability and stuff. If we're swinging out of them, they don't have this freedom to stand off, particularly a fence with a back rail. So they're not going to want to stand off. So if they're too strong, and that's sometimes when a horse does that kind of last minute stop and you're going, oh, he was really taking me into the fence, and then he just stopped. He probably stopped because he didn't have enough freedom to use himself or herself to jump the fence because there was too much contact. Or, fence 5 was a bit scary, made a right mess of that. The horse probably was too far off to stand off, so needed to put in an extra stride. Now they would, if they were loose jumping, they would easily put in that extra stride. They can put an extra stride in about like less than a meter. They can put in a stride as long as they haven't been paralyzed in their back by us. There's 2 points of contact. One is our seat and one is our hand. And the harder we are, the less flexibility they have to adjust themselves. But if we're soft, some horses take off and go too fast. And I can be an example of this, as in my horses would be very that way inclined. That I love a very blood horse with a lot of, with a real desire to go cross country. So Talisman is like that. And it's that sort of whoa release. It's a lot of transitions. And it's going schooling. It's going into a cross country environment and doing basics. When you take a lot of those hot horses and a lot of those fast horses, don't bid up too quickly. Try not to bid up at all if you can avoid it. Have the discipline and I'm getting better at this. I'm still learning. I didn't do this well enough with Rocketman or Talisman. So I would do their basics better if I could. Go schooling and even trot canter or walk trot walk, jump a fence out of trot and be able to come back to a walk and soften and pat and go again. And you got to take the chaos out of cross country, because it's the chaos and the adrenaline that creates this, too much forwardness, and then we can't be soft. Transitions will help. They've got to let us in. They've got to allow us to be there, and we've got to be a team. We've got to be able to hold hands, not strangle. We've got to be able to hold hands on the contact. They've got to accept that contact, and they've got to accept it mentally and physically. So the biggest mistake is generally when we go cross country, it's just chaos. It's just fast and furious, kicking, hanging on, and then at the end, all our heart rates are up. We're all sweating. We're all, adrenaline through the roof, and we're all probably delighted with ourselves, and it feels great, but it was a bit of a mess, and it was a bit scary and a bit panicky. And actually, if we do that when we're schooling, by the time we got to go to a competition with way more horses around and way more galloping across open fields, it's just going to be way more out of control. So we've got to practice that. We've got to practice going across fields and being able to do transitions and just calm everything down.
Well, Sam, thank you so much. This has been so fascinating hearing all your opinions for the last 40 minutes or so. It's been amazing. I'm sorry, I have really just thrown these questions at him, listeners. He's had no time to prepare. So this is proper, authentic answers. But thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem at all. It's an absolute pleasure. You can tell I talk way too much. The fact that some of those I can answer. But there was definitely a few I had to think about. Great questions. Thanks very much, folks, for everyone who did put in a question, and look, happy to expand on things again in the future if there's anything and if you disagree with things or you chat, I love that as well, because it helps me to, and I think this scoring system and things like that, there's a lot of thinking needs to be done, and great to hear, people from their side of it as well, what they think and whether they agree, disagree. It's all good.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you, listeners, as well, for tuning in. And stay tuned, because over the winter, we're going to hear a lot more of Sam, because we have a very special series coming up. But thank you for tuning in. And that's all we've got time for on the Eck Ratings Eventing podcast.
Hi, it's Sparkles Watson here. And one of my favourite Cardet & Martin products is Tea Tree Hoof Oil. I would use this a lot at home as well as competitions. All of our horses live out, so they would have it on before they go out, and when they come in, it is brilliant at managing the moisture balance in their feet, so it stops when the ground gets too dry or when the ground is too wet. And then also it makes their feet look very sparkly and shiny at the competitions.